This is the video notes that are going to go with our guided notes, graphing a system of linear inequalities. Okay, this is part 1. This is where we're going to look at inequalities that deal with Hooy-Vogts. Okay, now what is going to happen here is just like with systems of equations, we're going to be graphing two inequalities on the same piece of graph paper. And we're going to want to find the section of the graph where they overlap each other. Okay, so let's just jump in and see how this is going to work. Okay, so if I look at example 1 right here, my first inequality right here says y is less than 5. So I'm going to go to positive 5 on the y-axis. I'm going to graph a dotted line since it doesn't have the equal to. Okay. Now, I'm not going to shade it just yet. I'm going to put in my boundary line for this inequality next. Okay. Now, this inequality says y is greater than negative 3. So I'm going to go to negative 3 right here. And I'm going to make my line. Again, my line here is going to be dotted. So I'm going to make my dotted line. Okay. Now, what happened here is we actually got our graph paper cut into 3 regions. I've got the region up here above it where we don't kind of run out of paper. We've got the region right here between the lines, and we've got the regions right here below it. Okay. Now, I'm going to shade one of those 3 regions, above it, between it, below it. Okay. The inequalities is going to tell me that. Now look right here. It says y is less than 5. So y's got to be a number smaller than 5. But it's also got to be a number that's greater than negative 3. On my graph paper, where do I find the numbers that are smaller than 5 but larger than negative 3? Where I find it is this whole little part right there. All of those numbers I just highlighted are numbers that are smaller than 5 but larger than 3. So what I'm going to do is graph this whole color in or shade in this whole part of my graph paper between my lines. Just like that. Okay. Now, example 2 is similar, but instead of having horizontal lines, it's just going to have vertical lines. So if I look at example 2 right here, it says x is greater than negative 4. So I'm going to go to negative 4 on the x-axis. It is a dotted line, so I'm going to make a dotted vertical line. There we go. Now, I'm going to do the shading last step. Here, my line says x is less than or equal to 3. So if I go over here at 3, what I'm actually going to graph, remember, is that solid line because it has the equal to part. So let's get us a nice bold-faced solid line with arrows, okay? Now, I want you to think about what the inequalities is saying. It's saying x has to be larger than 4, and it also has to be less than or equal to 3. So where do I find the numbers on my x-axis that are larger than 4 but smaller than 3? I find them right in there, in between those two lines again. So that's what I'm going to shade. I'm going to shade right in here in between those two lines. There we go. Okay, now pause it again if you need to. Make sure you got this copied down, and then we'll go to example 3 and example 4. Okay. Now, example 3 and 4 is different because you have one y inequality and one x inequality. So still the same thought process, but it's going to look a little different. Okay, so let's do our first one. Y is less than or equal to -2. So that means I'm going to -2 on my y-axis. That is a less than or equal to, so I have to have a solid line. So make me a solid line right there with arrows. Okay. Again, not going to do any shading until I get both of my lines in. Now, our second line is x is greater than -4. So I'm going to go to -4 on the x-axis. Okay. Now, it's going to be a vertical line that is dotted. All right, now before we even talk about shading, let's just stop and look at our graph right now. Our two lines just cut this graph into 4 regions. I've got this region up here. That's like 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to shade one of those 4 regions that matches what I need here. Okay, now I'm going to use my hands to help me show what we're going to do. It says that y has to be less than or equal to -2. That means I cannot be anywhere above that y line. Okay, the only places I can be is down here. Okay, so it's got to be either here or here. My x inequality says I have to be greater than. That means I've got to go to the right. So not only can I have to be down here below the y line, I have to be on the right of the x line. Okay, so I have to be below this line and to the right of this line. So the area that I'm going to shade is right there, below my y, to the right of my x. Okay. Now, example 4 is very similar. Example 4 is very similar. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this one. It says y is greater than -4. Come down here to -4 on the y-axis. It is a dotted line. Okay. Okay. Now it says up here, x is less than or equal to 3. So that means I come to 3 on the x-axis. That is a solid line. Put in a solid line right there. Now again, if this has cut my picture into 4 regions. I've got this big region right here. That's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and then over here in this little big corner is region 4. One of those is going to get shaded. Which one? All right, let's think about this. Y is greater than. That means I've got to be above this Y line. So it can't be down here at the bottom. Got to be above it. x is less than or equal to 3. That means I've got to be to the left of my x line. So I got to be above the y, to the left of the x, and the region that I'm going to shape for this is right in here. I just went over my line a little bit. I colored outside the lines. There we go. Okay. Now, go ahead and get these into your notes, interactive notebook, and then when you're ready, you can watch the video part 2.